for that.
Okay. This is Senate Appropriations. It's Thursday, February 2nd, and our first testimony regarding the 2023 budget adjustment from the Agency of Natural Resources, and it's coming from the Department of Environmental Conservation. So we have Commissioner, you're going to, do you want to speak yourself, or you have a colleague here with you as well?
I'll get us started.
Okay.
So good afternoon. For the record, my name is John Beeling. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Environmental Conservation. With me this afternoon is Matt Chapman, who is the Division Director for the Waste Management and Prevention Division. One of the main goals of Mass Division is to address contamination in drinking water. That's one of the things that we do. I think this committee is probably familiar with PFAS compounds. I think most people have heard about them at this point. I don't know.
A little overly, actually.
Yeah, a little more than you'd like, right?
I live in a zone of contamination.
There you go. So really, since 2016, this has been one of the major focuses of our department, certainly at Mass Division. Excuse me, after Bennington, we began looking around and finding PFAS contamination in a number of locations. And so typically, if we were to find a source, some kind of industrial or commercial source, we would look around that facility and determine if there was either public drinking water supplies or private supplies that were impacted. Excuse me. And we were able to determine that there are a number, not surprisingly, and we have a very good handle on certainly public drinking water supplies. The other effort we started to undertake at that point in time was to look around for other areas where we might find PFAS, and we are finding it in soils, some surface waters, and that led us to determine that it is likely that there are private drinking water wells out there that are impacted by PFAS. So it's a data gap, and it's one that we really need to fill. So our proposal, I should also mention that this does relate in part to some litigation the state is engaged with against 3M and DuPont, the manufacturers of PFAS. And so part of that effort, part of that lawsuit, is to try to gain an understanding of the impact on private drinking water wells and to get sufficient data so that the experts can model it and make an estimate of how many wells have been impacted, how many private wells have been impacted. So the initial round, and this has already started, is to look at 500 wells. And so to further that effort, we sent out 700 letters last Friday to Vermonters across the state. We don't just want to focus on areas that we know already have PFAS. We need to get a comprehensive view of what's going on out there. As of yesterday, we had 59 volunteers, 59 folks volunteered to have their private wells tested. So good start. Excuse me.
Did you have some criteria that you used in sending out these requests? I'm assuming so.
Yes, we really tried to get a broad-based determination, because if you focus only on certain areas, the criticism will be that we bias the survey and we've only looked at places where it's likely to be. So it's statewide, it's throughout the entire state. Even in pretty rural areas, we want to look around and see what we're finding out there. You probably know, or if you don't, PFAS comes from a lot of different things. It's not like a typical industrial contaminant.
We rely on Senator Lyons for our technical assistance.
We've got a bill in our committee right now.
So we need to deal with that issue. We need to deal with the upstream issue, but we're here now, and we have to figure out what impacts are out there, what's going on. It comes from a lot of different places, so it's very challenging substance to try to regulate and manage. So this is, I think, a good first step in trying to get a handle on how many private drinking water wells. Many Vermonters get their water from private wells, and so this is a significant
But
issue.
then the question is, after it's detected,
and that's what we're here to talk about.
Then what?
Exactly what we're here to talk about. So the $3 million that's in the Budget Adjustment Act is really directed towards this first round. And so I should mention that the law firm who's been retained by the state, they're actually paying for the testing for the 500 wells. That's coming out of their funds. At that point, we believe it's our responsibility to provide relief to folks who have PFAS in their wells above standards. And so what we anticipate is we've made some estimates based upon really what we've seen in public supplies. So we've estimated about 15% are going to come back with hits above standard. And so for those wells, what we proposed is to install, there's really three things you can do, but there's two that we're really focused on. Install what's called a point of entry treatment system. That's, before the water gets into the house, you actually put in a filtration system and you treat the water before it gets to the homeowner.
And you can do it that way. Then?
Yes,
Oh.
yes. And there's a number, there's a fair amount of these across the state. It's not that unusual.
Did they do that in Bennington then, with some of the private wells?
Yes, they did.
Yes, the ones that we could hook up to.
Yeah.
Well, even in the beginning, they did too, because as soon as they found the problem, they began putting in the akin to a Brita filter.
It's
Just a huge thing.
It's our activated carbon. So that's how we propose to manage it from the start. The other thing that we do, as we always do, is once we find contamination, we go and look around. You find it here, we need to test around there. Excuse me, to make sure that there aren't other impacted homeowners. So there's really two phases. One is we've got to get out there, put in the POET systems, so that's one portion of the funding, and then pay for the investigation, the follow-up investigation for those properties. So in the short run, we anticipate we'll install POETs on a number of houses, start the investigation, and so at least these first, I think we're saying roughly 75. That's the number we're estimating based on what we know. 500. So that's a significant cost. We don't really want to be in a position to say just wait for us. We really need to do this. So and then as we get going, we'll do more investigation, install more POETs. I mean, the other option for some homeowners, hopefully, would be to connect to a municipal water supply. Right? That's much better than a POET system. POET systems, they mentioned POET systems cost a good amount of money to maintain. You have to change out these filters once a year, and it's expensive. It's about $2,500 a year. So it's significant. So there's a lot of cost going forward. But this is really, the $3 million is really focused on how we're going to deal with this initial round, both in addressing the contamination that we find, and then in conducting a further investigation and seeing where that leads us.
So this is $3 million into the environmental contingency fund is your budget.
So
request.
I'm not sure I understood what you were just saying. So you install one of these units every year. It's $2,500 to re-up it.
It's the same unit. It's the filtration. You have to maintain it, and in maintaining, you basically have to change out the filter, and that's very expensive.
So the filter itself, replacement is $2,500 then?
I'm sorry.
So am I right that every one of these that you install, if there's a going forward in perpetuity, $2,500 a year?
There's ongoing costs. That's correct.
Well, and the system, obviously that's to replace the filter. So is there a lifespan for one of these filtration systems?
As long as it's above standards. So
No, I meant
The system
before,
itself.
yeah.
The systems, for the record, Matt Chapman, Director of Waste Management Division, the filters themselves are fairly simple systems. So it's really just replacing the canisters of granular activated carbon. There's actually UV lights, again, to treat for bacteriological issues. So it's those types of sort of simple replacements that end up, they do have a life. I think it's somewhere in the 10 to 15 year range.
So in
So
the meantime, 2,500 years, not inconsequential.
that's correct.
Yes.
Think of a Brita filter, and that's really what you're talking about. And many of my constituents did not trust that system, and they might have used it for bathing and stuff, but they would not use it for drinking or cooking. They continue to use bottled water.
For drinking. Senator Lyons, did you have a question? No, go ahead. Okay. But we would pay to install, but then the homeowner would be responsible for the annual cost, or?
So in the 3 million, this is just limited to this particular budget adjustment ask, the 3 million. So in there, we have built in about 1 year of operation and maintenance for the first 75. there's a larger issue going forward on operation and maintenance for these systems. That's not in this particular budget.
Senator Lyons.
So it's a whole water system? You don't have it just selectively at one place in the house or?
It's point of entry, so it's.
Yeah, it is part of it, but
So that takes.
if you filtered less water through it, it might last 2 years. And you
No, the
couldn't drink the
filter-
water out of all the faucets, but.
Matt, you know.
So
I'm just trying
Sure, I mean, there are a number of variables that go
Okay.
into play as to how often you have to treat the carbon. It is like a Brita filter, but it's like two Brita filters on top of each other, right? So you have one system that's your initial system and then a backup system to make sure that you're not getting what we call breakthrough into the actual drinking system. And what we do is we test that. I think we test them quarterly, right? No, it's semi-annually to make sure that we're not seeing a detection from system one getting through to system two. As soon as we start seeing detections, then we change the carbon out in both the units. And we know that the things, I mean, there are basically two things that drive the carbon breaking down, like the change out needing to happen quicker. It's the hardness of the water, because the hardness tends to clunk up the system, right? And then also the concentration of PFAS in the drinking water.
So in Bennington, we know the source, and it was a manufacturing. As you get into more rural areas of the state, can you tell us a bit where you think that source of contamination would come from? Other than, I mean, I don't think dry cleaning, they've tended to be,
Yeah.
they've tended to be brownfields and stuff, but the presence of dry cleaner doesn't affect this.
Our understanding is that we think it's mostly coming from consumer products,
Consumer
which gets back to Senator Lyons' statement about getting it out of Congress.
Also
So
fire.
yeah, well, and I just read a report about the incidence of PFAS at ski areas, which is huge, right? So are you seeing that? Even by
ski areas.
clothing, ski wax?
I just want to go back to the,
Just comes out.
Cortex, I mean, PFAS is
Yeah.
used, but
The money.
it's non-stick and also water.
Oh, yeah.
go back to the money. I understand our concern about the budget from the state of Vermont and the taxpayer of the state of Vermont paying, but I don't think the victims of the pollution should be paying. So where we don't have an identifiable source of the contamination, I think we need to make sure that we don't put it onto the victims.
And this is what this is designed
This is
to
what,
do.
yeah, so I want
Yeah.
Right, this is really just the initial effort. There's, in the larger budget, there's also some monies, excuse me, being requested to deal with a little bit longer term.
Senator Stark.
Yeah, have you worked out a budget on this 3 million? Because from what I understand, from what I've heard, you've got 75 homes, private drinking water, and you project it to cost $3 million. Well, that figures out to, the way I do it, is $30,000 a household that we're gonna spend to go test their water and do whatever. So if you worked out a budget of where the money's gonna be spent on and on what, and the other issue that I have a question on is I think you stated that the insurance company that the state has hired to work on this, send out the 500 letters or whatever it was. Did they do that on their nickel or on the state's nickel that they must have paid them to do this work?
So the answer is yes, we do have a budget for where this money would go. Second question, I believe we pay for the mailing, Matt? I don't
We
recall.
pay for the mailing, yes.
But they did pay for the initial testing. They're going to pay for the initial
And
testing.
did you say the insurance company?
It's a law firm.
Law firm, that's what I thought you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Legal.
So if I can go through kind of where our estimates come from. So we've estimated 75 wells out of the 500. So we sent out 700 letters, hoping to get 500 positive.
Can I ask if you're feeling all right?
I'm fine, I just have a cold, I'm nothing
Would you like
bad.
some water? We do have a
Jen,
supply.
a glass of water would be great.
We wouldn't want people to come in with colds.
Yeah, it's very minor as far as I can tell. I hope, sorry.
Others.
I'm a little hoarse, but I don't really feel that bad. I just have a little cough. So the installation of the 75 impacted wells, that's $255,000. 1 year of operation maintenance for the 75 wells, it's $255,000. Bottled water, we're gonna need to get bottled water to some of these folks.
So you're projecting, I don't want to interrupt you, but every well's gonna be messed up.
No, he's saying
No.
75 out of the 500.
15%. And that's based upon what we've seen from the public.
Well, no, you're gonna have, you said 700 letters. You hope to get 500 positive responses.
They don't hope to get.
Well, we hope to get none.
No, to allow the testing.
This is just a lot of testing.
That's all. So 500 will allow the testing. Out of that 500, you anticipate 75 will in fact need remediation, if I understand
That's
the
correct.
figures correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, so, so that it's the 75 positive tests
Right.
out of that 500
Right.
that you would need to assist them with their system
Right.
to make sure that, because it's a carcinogen, right?
Oh, yeah.
It has a number of them.
Yeah. Okay, so, wait, Bobby, you still doing your calculation?
Well, it's just, no, it's fine. I would just think it would be easier to send out the 500 letters or 700 letters, tell people you may have a problem, please send in your water sample and we'll test it. And so then you've got 75 that are contaminated and you go and deal with it.
Well, except for variation, that's what they're doing. Instead of sending it in, you're saying it's
Somebody's
okay to
getting-
test.
Somebody's getting a lot of money here for doing something that.
Well, just to be clear, the law firm is paying for the water testing. The state is not paying for the initial testing.
So the 500 that say it's okay to test my well, there's no cost to the state for
That's
that. Although probably the law firm might be billing us. Or is there some indirect cost here? Maybe that's what Senator Starr is trying to get hold of.
They're operating on a contingency fee.
Right.
So this is part of their litigation costs they would seek to recover in either a judgment or so.
Okay. Does that answer the question then? We don't pay for the testing. The 500, we hope will say yes, and we anticipate, but without knowing for certain, your estimate is 75.
Right. And then just to make clear, the follow-up investigation, which is, we have well here, we're gonna look at, we will be paying for that. Law firm pays for the first 500, but then it's up to the state. This is how.
So if Senator Starr says, test my well, and it comes back positive,
Yep.
you want to see if they're adjacent property owners to Senator Starr's, and then that ancillary testing
Right.
would be on
Right.
your dime.
And that's in this 3 million.
That's in the 3
Yes.
million as well. Yeah. All right, Senator Westman, and then.
So-
So we get the 75 that are positive back. Have you done any sort of calculation about how many tests we'll do out around that? Or what is the scope of this? Because if you do come back with 75 tests that are positive, we're gonna wanna test the whole neighborhoods around that at that point. Is that coming out of a lawsuit? Is that going to have to, because once we open.
Coming out of the 3 million. there.
Well, the 3 million's not gonna last very long if we
Yeah,
have to.
I
do-
guess that's the big thing. Some of this estimates, and you're absolutely right, it could mean that it's much bigger than.
Is there money in next year's budget beyond the budget adjustment to continue this work? if you're anticipating 15%, we aren't going to be able to leave this for people, and we're going to have to, so not having had the budget presentation for next year, is there money in there to continue this effort?
We believe that the estimates that we put together are assuming that, I don't recall how many we assumed would be also contained in the spillover, I guess we probably should.
So 2 questions. Yes, there is money in next year's budget to help round out this larger project. And I guess I would say the confidence level that we're gonna get 15% with this first group is much higher than knowing what the next sort of group is going to be, because it all depends on where we find them, right? If it's in a suburban neighborhood, there's gonna be more wells that we need to test, but we estimated it could be somewhere in the range between 200 and 600 additional wells that would need to be tested after this.
All right, so when we got into the 24 budget, you have additional money. This is just sort of to get this.
This is to get this out there.
Other questions? Oh, yes, Ann, sorry.
Oh, can you just send us
Sure,
your breakup? Because I think that would be helpful. Breakdown. That was
Oh, that was it. Other questions? Okay, so a test coming near you, I guess. And you're doing it in all regions of the state. Anything else that anyone has for a question? We do have the beginning of the 24 budget this afternoon, so we can
So
maybe
can
at
I
least
just-
have to figure.
Were the 500 just random, or do it's just random?
So we basically have a database of well drillers. We also use GIS mapping that we have through the Agency of Digital Services to look at housing density. And we basically we have people who are statisticians who basically looked at it and stratified it. So we have some rural areas where you have larger properties or less dense properties than another grouping where there's more like village centers and sort of more dense areas.
But it's all just.
But it is random, yeah, it is random.
So if you know that there's an area where PFAS might be located, are you going to be targeting that going forward?
So we're targeting those now. So really the purpose of this testing exercise is to help us have an understanding of what I would call, and I hate using like ambient or background, but to have a general understanding of what we might see throughout the state where there's no known environmental source. Because I think it's, as you're aware, Senator Alliance, this is a challenge just frankly from rural communities on septic systems washing their clothes that have PFAS in them and then discharging that into groundwater affecting their own wells, right? So.
All right, well, I guess it's around us in ways that we didn't even think of. All right. Other questions of the commissioner? If not, appreciate your coming in. Do you have anything more that you
No,
want to
thank you,
add?
Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Sears, I know you experienced this very directly for a number of years and what it does to families and concerned about their health, particularly the young children, I'm sure.
But you gotta say that the Agency of Natural Resources did a terrific job in Bennington. It was really unbelievable. And there was a similar situation in New York. The agency there did not do what I think was their job to protect their citizens. Really, the agency stood out, I think, gained a great deal of respect, particularly Matt and his crew down there. You think?
Great.
Richard and all who moved to Bennington pretty much. Were there and people were angry and they dealt with them well.
Well, you know, when people
You
are
know,
fearful.
we often hear about government being the enemy. I don't know where we would have been without your folks backing up every step of the way and the actions taken under 2 administrations, Bill Shumlin and Scott. You're taking over a division that has a great deal of respect, at least in Bennington.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your coming in and giving us a little bit more explanation. Also giving us sort of a segue into the 24 budget. that we're gonna do.
We'll be there.
You'll be back. Good. Well, we'll still have water.
Okay.
We hope it's pure.
Yeah, these are tested.
All right, so our next item is at 2:30. So I'm going to suggest that we take a break until 2:30, and when we're going to have Commissioner Gresham come in with